Hi, this is Nikolai from Synth-o-rama. This video is about remixing. I've been doing remixing for a few years, and I thought that it might be interesting for some of you guys to follow my process, what goes through my head when I work through a remix, what thoughts pops up along the way. I'm thinking both technical but also artistic. So sometimes they are dependent on each other. Sometimes one blocks the other. You have some artistic vision or some cool idea for sound design, and then there's some technical stuff that kind of blocks it, or stuff like that. So I'm kind of in this video. I mean, it is structured, but it's also in a flow. So I'm letting you know stuff along the way. So yeah, but just to give you a little background about myself, I am a musician and have been a musician for a lot of years. So the latest project I've been in is this electronic dark wave duo called Twin Tonality. What you gonna do now? What you gonna do now? What you gonna do now? So apart from that, I've also been doing audio work like a sound designer, a sound recordist for motion pictures, radio, television, theater, stuff like that. Some of you might know this Danish film called Sidste Time. I did some sound work for that. And also due to me being in this Danish band called Kyd. I opened your chest and in there I find my own We participated in the soundtrack for the Danish motion picture called Pusher. So, but talking about remixing, I started it a few years ago, and the first remix I did was an American artist called Adriel. I really like her stuff, and she's also into the whole synth and drum machine scene, so I enjoyed doing that. And later on I did a remix for a Danish alternative rock band called Nelson Can. I mean, they're not into synthesizers, not particularly anyway. It's not like the primary instrument of their music. But I kind of took their output this. It was 2 songs actually, but I took them into my kind of universe, my kind of thing, with the synthesizers and the drum machines and stuff like that. So if you want me to make a remix video about that sometime in the future, let me know in the comments. So, but the latest remix I've been doing is with a Danish artist called Hunbjørn. I got to know her not that long ago, and we talked about me doing a remix for her. And her latest EP is called Next Summer, and I really enjoyed listening to that. But the song that I mostly enjoyed, that I really got into, was the song called All the Red. It just has this kind of dreamy quality to it, and also kind of romantic, but also a little bit dancey at the same time, even though it's not a banger. So try to explain that. I can't explain it, but I really like this song, and I especially like the production and the melody. So I agreed to remix this song, but afterwards I was kind of like, hey, how am I going to improve this? Because it's already kind of sounds great, kind of optimal. So So I just thought, well, I might, there's no reason trying to top it because it can't be done, I think. So so why not just put my like personal touch on it, like move it in a slightly different direction, still like with synthesizers and stuff, but more like my treatment. And also I wanted to make more space like for the music, so it wasn't that intense like vocally. So I cut the vocals up, but you'll see all that stuff later in the video. Yeah, so some of you might notice in the background that I'm an avid collector of synthesizers and drum machines and stuff like that. Spring reverbs, I'm a pretty huge fan of spring reverbs. They're very nice. So yeah, and I'm going to introduce, not that I'm focusing on it, but I'll mention what I'm using along the way. I'm not using any VST synthesizers for this remix. It's all like analog stuff. I can mention this this yellow synth thingy with wooden buttons called a Septavox. It's from Krita and Guitari. If some of you, I guess some of you know this company already. Great company, makes a lot of fun boxes. And also we've got this this wooden Italian box, like it's called a Multicasa, a really crazy percussion machine. And also like a retro, like vintage drum machine, the TR-707, for example. So, but I'll mention these along the way, and also the analog synth I'm using. So, but apart from that, I just want to mention that this channel is kind of new. It's at this point in time, it's like 2 months old. So I just want to mention that if you like my stuff, you can see this video, and if you're of course welcome to see the other videos if you like the direction I'm in, and I really appreciate you subscribing to my channel. I know, like, if you watch like YouTube videos frequently, there's a lot of this stuff going on, like with please click on this and please subscribe to that, and I fully understand, like, can be a little bit annoying maybe, but but personally I would just like to get like some kind of feedback that if you like my stuff, and which would be really great, I'll happily do more of this in the future. So you can both let me know in the comments, but also subscribe to my channel, like my stuff if you feel that it's something that provides value from you. If it doesn't, I mean, don't do it. Like, there's no need, so you decide. So, but apart from that, let's just move on and get into the good stuff, doing the remix.
Truth
here we have the final remix. I'm using Cubase. You can see on top here that this is Hunbjørn, all the red. This is version 40. So, and within 40, I've been doing tests for like 36 different subversions. So you can get kind of crazy doing that for so many versions. So, but just to give you an overview, I've tried to organize it the best I could, because that just makes for much easier workflow, I think. Usually it starts very messy, like I'm just trying all kinds of stuff out, and then gradually I'm cleaning up, putting things in folder, giving them meaningful names, doing a song structure up here, for example, so I know like where does the verse start and so on. So, but I have an audio folder here, and I have the stems that Ulla, which is a real name like Hunbjørn, she sent me the stems to use however I saw fit. So the very first thing I do when I start a remix is establishing a tempo. I mean, it's not necessary that I do the remix in the original tempo of the song. I mean, I'm free to do pretty much everything usually. But I find that especially if you want to sync the stems up to other stuff you do, it's a great starting point to get this project up and running. So, and the way I do that in Cubase, and I think it's pretty similar in other DAWs as well. Cubase has like a tempo calculator. So for Cubase, I just go up here and search for the calc. And we have the beat calculator here, right? So I just use that one. And I kind of, you just use the space bar on your keyboard to calculate the tempo. And for that, you of course need the original version. I think I have the original version down here somewhere. So let's hear the track. And then go back to Cubase and use the calculator. So we're going to tab the tempo, right? And pretty soon you can see that it kind of settles down, like close to 107. So at the time I just took a wild guess and punched in 107, and it perfectly lined up, so that was cool. I mean, of course I could have asked Hunbjørn, what is the tempo? But this was much quicker when I just got into it at first. So 107 for the tempo. And to give you an overview of the project, we have an audio folder, stems, that's kind of also audio, but I want it separate from the other stuff. So the first thing I did was just line all the stems up and just get a feel for like what tracks do I have to work with, if any. I mean, I'm not forced to use any of it. But the first thing I just did was just listen to all the tracks and get a feel, like also inspiration maybe. And I mean, different people have different philosophies about doing remixes, of course. My philosophy is kind of like, I like to do my own thing, but I also like there to be some kind of recognition, like when you know the original version. Even though I've changed quite a lot of stuff, you still have these elements that point towards the original version, so it's not like completely foreign, but it's also not the same, of course. So I ended up using a few elements that's very recognizable from the original version. Of course, the vocals is the most recognizable. So I did that. Some remixers like to cut stuff up so that it's almost unrecognizable. I'm not entirely in that boat, I think. Again, I like there to be some recognition. I have been cutting the vocals up. I can talk about that later, but not to the extent that it's maybe sounds like someone else or some robot or whatever. So I can play you a few samples from the stems. This is some of the choirs. Here's some bass stems. This is a Juno bass, I think. And there's also some drums as well. Yeah, this is kind of like several elements mixed into one stereo track. So I didn't use that, but it's nice for reference. What I did use was some guitar. Actually, those we just heard I haven't used, but I've used. I didn't use guitar. There's also some guitar stuff on it. You can hear some of that here. I'm giving you the click just for reference, so you kind of can listen to it rhythmically. So there's some other stuff coming up here. Let's check that out. Yeah, but I didn't use that either. But I have used the vocals, of course, and I've used some synthesizer stuff. Primarily, there's a JP8000, which is a Roland synthesizer from the late 90s. That's one of Hunbjørn's many synthesizers. And it's a very recognizable theme, so I kept that in for the outro. I actually thought it was a guitar at first, when it was mixed with the original version, but it turns out it's a synth. Very nice. So that's kind of it. We have the stems, and from there I just started cutting stuff up, getting inspiration from multiple places, and just started working on it. So let's continue. So I'm an avid fan of spring reverbs. I kind of collect them. I think they're great. Their simplicity and their rawness is something else. I put spring reverb on stuff pretty much all the time if I find it useful. So let's see. I have a bunch of tracks, so it's just easier to search for the spring reverb. And this, I mean, I'm not talking about simulations or VST plugins or whatever. This is real spring. I'm using a Vermona stereo spring reverb, and I track it. Sometimes I track it directly, like when I'm playing a synth, so I track both the synth and the spring reverb at the same time. Other times I'm just tracking the synth or drum machine or whatever, and then later on in the process, I kind of make a loop, meaning that I solo the track from the DAW, put it into the spring reverb and back, and I record the spring reverb. So I have some on TR-707, at one point, because the kick drum is very important, I think. In the original version, it's very important. It kind of glues the track together, and it turned out that would be the role for it as well in my remix, even though the rhythm isn't exactly the same. So I tracked my 707 and tried different stuff out. I tried just putting it directly into, like, recording it directly, but I also tried, I have an old Roland mixer from the same period as my Space Echo 201. So it has a very cool sound to it, and it also has built-in spring reverb. So let's listen to the 707 kick through the Roland mixer. So we also have it through my, I have a tube compressor, a universal audio tube compressor, 6176 it's called. Let's hear that. Okay. And this has to be the 707 recorded directly. And these are just to get different vibes, like, and then I can later decide on which is better and which I prefer. So and I also have some hardware effects. I have this DEP5. It is a Roland, a vintage, you might call it, effects machine. So let's have a listen to that. Maybe we can take the 707 directly and with the effect. I actually ended up not using this reverb, but it was nice to investigate. But other than that, I was actually talking about the spring reverb, right? Here's a spring reverb. And coupled with the 707 direct signal. From the Roland mixer. So, yeah, let's move on. Okay, we have some spring on synth as well. This one. So you can see there's some double tracking going on here. I recorded the Jupiter 4 in mono, and I have a stereo spring here as well. Let's listen to the Jupiter 4 by itself. With the spring. Maybe we should listen to it in context. I just feel that the spring reverb gives so much more life to it than if it was like a digital reverb or whatever. The thing with the spring reverbs is that due to its being real, like metallic springs, like two, what do you call it, like repercussions or like two movements of the spring are not the same. It's always different compared to maybe not every digital reverbs, but at least many of them. It kind of it feels like it's the same. Like every repeat is kind of the same, right? So plus this is more crunchy, I think, less perfect. So I really dig that sound. But I mean, that was the spring reverbs. Let's move on to the next. Okay, let's focus on what kind of effects I've used and why. We can zoom in on the master bus. So let's see what I'm doing with the master bus. We have the different groups here. I work a lot with groups, but more on that later. Let's focus on the master bus, which is this one over here. And there's a few plugins activated. My default setup always have, this is actually this console recall is like a universal audio thing that it kind of can remember where your faders are and what settings you have in their own console, like you have a console with your audio interface, so that's pretty nice. But I also have this span plugin, which is like an analyzer. So if I start the music, you get a really nice like representation of the different frequencies. And this plugin is just kind of crazy. There's so many opportunities, so many possibilities to visualize the music in different ways. Maybe I'm using like 5% of what it can do, but I mean, that's okay. It's a free plugin. So it's nice with this representation. Let's see what else we have here. Part of my default setup is always to have a limiter just before it going out to like when you bounce the track. So and I have this limiter Pro L2, which is, in my opinion, the best one you can find for this kind of application. So right now it's not activated, but I mean, I can activate it. So you just like pull this up. So you kind of create like a ceiling up here. So the more you push it up, the more it kind of limits the peaks, right? And you can see how hard is it working. So that's pretty nice, and you also can have true peak limiting. So the inter-peak samples also gets accounted for. So that's part of my default setup. This is really nice. Let's go back to 0 here and look at the other stuff. For this one, I mean, it's always a question of like, should the mastering be a separate process? I've tried both philosophies. Like, I guess you could say the most political correct thing would be to not do any mastering, just do the mix, and then in a different process, either you do the mastering or you send it out of the house to an external master engineer. And that's kind of the old way of doing it, or also the present way of doing it. But I mean, that's how it has been mostly done historically. But with all these home studios and stuff, I guess some people find it useful to do all the stuff in one go. I mean, I could go on and on about this subject. As I said, I tried both processes. I find it useful to at least do the mastering on a different day. Like, but also I like my stuff to sound good, kind of early in the process, which is not always like the greatest thing, because it kind of locks you in to a certain way of producing. But in this example, I've kind of did some kind of mastering, but it's not that mastering kind of stuff I've been doing. I think of it more like getting a signature sound, and for that you also need like plugins on the master bus. So the part of the signature sound is well, I've been doing a little mastering here, of course. So I've been using this plugin, which is kind of like a stereo like processing plugin, and I don't use half of it as with many plugins I use, but I've been doing it to like creating a safe bass environment, like putting the lower frequencies in mono. So yeah, but apart from that I'm not using it very much. So I actually think this is not active, but many times I think it's standard. It's standard in my default setup, but you have the possibilities to cut some of the very sub-low frequencies, like in this instance like close to 40 Hertz, and do gentle like cutting or boosting where needed. So that was the mainly. Several of them, these plugins are from Universal Audio, so they kind of work with my interface, which is an Apollo 8. This one is not a Universal Audio plugin. This is an EQ plugin from FabFilter, and it's also, I mean, they make great plugins. For some reason this is not active right now, but I can see I've been working with some kind of dip in the higher mids, I think. Yeah, but I use this plugin a lot. It's very nice. If I should point to one plugin that really makes this signature sound, I ended up using. I actually experienced it quite a bit with recording this to like wheel-to-wheel tape machine, 1/4 inch, and I also experimented with putting it on a cassette tape. And the strange thing was that I had this sound in my head that was pretty dirty and pretty raw, and even putting it on a real cassette tape it was actually kind of too nice sounding. So I ended up using this plugin, which is just really great. It's called Sketch Cassette, and you can hear the difference if I just play you some of this. Let's hear something with drums over here maybe. This is bypassed. And this is with the effect. Pretty big difference, right? So this plugin enables you to do all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, you can really f this up. So this has got to be the plugin I use on this remix that kind of colors the sound the most. Okay, so let's talk about the effects I've been using on the separate tracks. I'm kind of following this, you could call it like 70s/80s, a little bit more raw style, like making it sound like it's been recorded to cassette. So to some degree I've also chosen some of the plugins like from that same period and that same style of sound. So for the bass, I used my Pro-One synthesizer, and which is also like from that period, and I added an effect. You can hear this. And it's the AMS, like it's a universal audio plugin, but it's an emulation of the pretty famous AMS reverb. And if you hang on, we can just see here. I mean, it's kind of crazy that I have all these effects going, I must admit. But this is the one on my Pro-One, so let's have a look at that. Yeah, so this is the AMS plugin, and as you can see, I've chosen the algorithm non-linear, which is like an historical, very used reverb, like patch program or whatever from this machine, of course in the hardware version, right? So, so the non-linear was kind of like, historically, I think actually it was like the kind of algorithm, the way it sounded was kind of like discovered by accident. It's kind of like a gated reverb that was discovered. Like you can read all about it if you Google it. It was something with I think it was Phil Collins. During a session that they have these talkback microphones. So you can sit in the control room and talk to the artist in the studio, and during that period, through the microphone from the control room, you get this very compressed sound that kind of abruptly stops. So so at some point, I guess you could hear the drums that Phil Collins were playing mixed in with the microphone from the control room, and you get this huge compressed reverb that stops very abruptly. So and after that, it was just like the effect that everyone wanted to use, and the companies soon followed, like doing machines like this one that have this kind of effect built in. So so I kind of deliberately sometimes use this effect to get into that groove, that time period. Let's see what else we have here. Well, actually, it might be more logical to zoom in on the kind of effects, like in my effects channel board right here. You can see the effects that I've been using. So it's just on solo. So this is kind of like, this is some effects that I've been using on Hunbjørn's vocals. And I recorded the RE201, the space echo, and I put it through the EMT 140. So it sounds like this. Yeah, okay, of course you can hear that there's more than just the vocals going through that that effect. There's also this, I think it's a Korg rhythm machine that's also going through it. Let's see what else we have here. So here, sometimes I have multiple instances of the AMS reverb. So this is interesting. There's also a Korg emulation. Korg SDD 3000. I think this is actually used with a drum machine, but for some reason it's pre-fader. Yeah, it's pre-fader, so you only hear the effect.